permanent member of the Meet the Press panel.
Dr. King, former President Truman was quoted by the AP as saying that the march from Selma, and this was his word, was silly and can't accomplish a darn thing except to attract attention. Now, there have been 2 murders, many beatings, and a federal expenditure for troops of about $300,000. Would you say that what the march accomplished was worth that cost?
Well, first I would say that the march was not silly at all. I would think that the march did more to dramatize the indignities and the injustices that Negro people continue to face in the state of Alabama and many other sections of the South more than anything else. I think it was the most powerful and dramatic civil rights protest that has ever taken place in the South, and I think it well justified the costs that we put in it. Now, of course, we're sorry that a death occurred immediately after the march, and I'm sure that all people of goodwill are outraged and in deep sorrow as a result of the death of Mrs. Liuzzo. But after all, we know in a nonviolent movement that there are these possibilities, and we go on with the faith that unmerited suffering is redemptive.
The curse of progressivism is that you will be judged and castigated and vilified by both ends of the existing order in your own time. It is inevitable. There is the conservative criticism that things shouldn't change at all. And then there is the liberal criticism is that things should change more politely or more slowly as to not upset the apple cart of the existing order too much. Progressivism pushes against both those perspectives. Not only that things should change, but they need to change now. Justice now. No matter who it makes uncomfortable. So, of course, you are going to be heavily vilified in the press and in the public because you have what seems like the 2 reasonable ends of the political spectrum judging you. In Martin Luther King's time, he was criticized by prominent Democrats, liberals like Harry Truman, as you can see in the earlier clip, and obviously conservatives like George Wallace. But they were along the same lines that Black Lives Matters is condemned today. Conservatives say, what injustice? And liberals say, okay, injustice, but can we do it without all the noise? Can you guys get your rights without all the noise, please? This is something that comes from a position of privilege. I got mine. Don't fuck this up for me, I got mine. And that is the biggest obstacle to progress. Because the truth about progressivism is that the people on the ground need justice today. It can't wait till tomorrow. You cannot wait to address mass police brutality and extrajudicial killing. You can't wait. It's your life. Progressives are always advocating against an existential threat. to their community. You can't be reasonable. That's the whole point of being an activist, is that your community has been pushed beyond the point of reasonable discourse, that you don't have time to talk it out, either because conservatives aren't listening to you or liberals don't perceive your situation with the same level of urgency. So it's a rock and a hard place, where one end is telling you to shut up and the other end is telling you, ask more politely, speak softly.
Demonstration was largely to get your voting rights bill through. Was it necessary for that purpose? Aren't you going to get that bill? And wouldn't you have gotten it whether or not you marched?
Well, the demonstration was certainly for the voting rights bill. However, we must recognize that there are other very tragic conditions existing in the state of Alabama, which are as humiliating, as degrading, and as unjust as the denial of the right to vote, namely police brutality. And we marched on the state of the capital of Alabama to protest the long night of brutality, the constant murders that continue to take place in that state, for after all, under the administration of Governor Wallace, there have been 10 persons actually killed and murdered, and nothing has been done about it. There have been untold bombings of homes and churches. Again, nothing has been done about this on the whole, and we were marching there to protest these brutalities, these murders, and all of the things that go along with them, as much as to gain the right to vote. So it was a twofold march aimed at trying to rectify the conditions of Alabama and expose the evils that are deeply engulfed in that state.
Dr. King, you had your great demonstration, and Governor Leroy...
Don't get all passionate. Don't get all carried away. The current spectrum in this space is very similar on the subject of Black Lives Matter, the current civil rights movement. You have the skeptics, the liberals, the self-identified liberals. They have no problem with gay marriage. They have no problem with trans people's rights, more or less, until you're non-binary, then they don't count you. They are mostly white men and women in a position of privilege, but they accept liberal economic policies and social policies. You can smoke weed and fuck whoever you want, and maybe we should raise the minimum wage, so on and so forth. But when you tell these fuckers that you're mad, that you're going to take to the street, and maybe in the process of getting yours, you might fuck shit up. Not because you want to, but because when you've reached that boiling point, when you have gone beyond that breaking point, you can't ask nicely. And the people on the conservative end of the spectrum, they're called cops. Their job is to use the monopoly of violence to keep the existing order intact. There is a reason they are called law enforcement and not justice dispensers. And that is because what's implicit in that is that cops will defend even unjust laws. Their responsibilities are rote. They are bereft. They are executed in what they would call an impartial fashion, and I would say is in something of a moral vacuum. I'm always very concerned about moral vacuums because of where it places people in the equation of right, wrong, just, unjust. Not that the police should be the final arbiter of justice, But by the time you get to a courthouse, you could already have had your civil rights undone, abused, and literally to the point of being killed. So we need justice in the street. It can't wait for the courthouse. And don't even get me started on how broken and corrupt and skewed the American justice system is. From having to pay bail for non-violent crimes, thousands of dollars in bail just to get out of jail before you go to trial. So that makes it a wealth privilege to not be in jail when you go to court and experience all of the emotional trauma and deprivation that happens in jail before you even see a courthouse, before they even evaluate whether or not you actually did something wrong. But if you've got money, you can buy your way out of that hardship. And when you move up the scale of actually going to the court, another toll, another financial litmus test comes with what attorney you can afford.
Honest enough to say that I do feel that there are two types of laws. One is a just law and one is an unjust law. I think we all have moral obligations to obey just laws. On the other hand, I think we have moral obligations to disobey unjust laws, because non-cooperation with evil is as much a moral obligation as is cooperation with good. I think the distinction here is that when one breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust, he must do it openly, he must do it cheerfully, he must do it lovingly, he must do it civilly, not uncivilly, and he must do it with a willingness to accept the penalty. And any man who breaks a law that conscience tells him is unjust and willingly accepts the penalty by staying in jail in order to arouse the conscience of the community on the injustice of the law is at that moment expressing the very highest respect for law.
So what we have is a transactional, monetized justice system. But let's go back to what's happening on the street. There is no justice in the street. Martin Luther King knew it. Black Lives Matter knows it. And they're both pushing against a society with injustice at the base level of enforcing the law. The 1960s, when Martin Luther King marched, a lot of the southern states had militarized police forces, to the extent that when they militarized the police force in LA, they imported law enforcement officials from the South to the West Coast to impose this kind of American Gestapo tactic onto black and brown communities on the West Coast. This was what Martin Luther King fought against. You will see posted within this video an image recording what public opinion was of Martin Luther King's movement, which was a movement expressing the whole. What fascinates me about the vilification of BLM as not proper successors to Martin Luther King is that Black Lives Matter is the soul of Martin Luther King's message was Black Lives Matter. Black votes matter. Black rights, black civil liberties matter. It's the same message. And it's controversial for the same reasons amongst the same people. So if you support this movement and see yourself being vilified and castigated and humiliated by both ends of the existing political spectrum, don't sweat them. Those people go in the trash bin of history. They always go in the trash bin of history. progressives always become heroes after they're dead, or if they live long enough, they get old enough to see the fruits of their labor become the existing order. The tragedy of progressivism is doing the right thing when a lot of the world around you either tells you it's the wrong thing, conservatives, or you're doing it the wrong way, liberals. This. Close your ears. If you want to be on the right side of history and do the right thing, you're going to have to close your ears to these people because their advice is reactionary. They're just defending themselves. From one end to the other, it's about defending their own privilege or making sure that losing their privilege is not going to happen at a rate that they're uncomfortable with. MLK Day, BLM future, full steam ahead.